Hey guys, Burden Temnik here. This will be on the JRB podcast channel, and if it's not, my bad for lying. So we're here with Daniel Peck. He made top four at the Queensland State Championships. If you don't know what the State Championships are the organized play initiative that Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand have. So what happens is instead of a national championship, which is what Europeans would conventionally know, we have a state championship where instead of it being the whole country, we are now split up into individual states. And what this does, it allows players to play a high level event without having to travel to an event like nationals, but then also have to travel to the WCQ Oceanics. And the same thing goes for the South African communities, where instead of them having like a nationals, they do their state championships because it makes a little bit more sense. There's less travel, and your pocketed community gets a little bit more representation. So Dan, if you want to, tell us what you've done, what happened, and all of this stuff. We both went over this deck together, so I'll have some input as well. But Dan, you have the floor.
Hello. Top four Queensland States. I played Tenpai. Every other deck felt, I don't know, it just had some kind of weakness that I wasn't really a fan of, or I didn't really like how it played. And I liked that this deck was somewhat unknown this week. I'm not sure how good it will be over the time, but this weekend I think it was a good choice.
There were a lot of picks that we had that we thought were only reasonable given the field that we were anticipating. So Dan's event was 108 people. It was 7 rounds of Swiss, and it was a cut to top 8. So it's on the smaller end. And we assumed that there would be a lot of people that after round 2 and sometimes even round 1, they would know he's playing Tenpai and they would make him start game 1. So a lot of the deck choices were built around that. And we feel like it's something that was neglected when it came to people's theories regarding this strategy, because it is quite a big thing. And you can't always be carried by cards like Hieratic Seal alone. So we made a lot of main deck choices dictated by that fact alone, as well as some other little metagame things. But I think it was a pretty well-rounded strategy. Dan, do you want to go over your matchups real quick?
Like you said, 7 rounds of Swiss, top 8 cut. I went 6-1 in Swiss and lost top 4. My matchups, I versed Snake Eye Kashtira round 1. I 2-0'd it. I versed Meliodas Steva round 2, 2-0'd. Tenpai round 3, 2-0'd that. Round 4 flew, 2-0. Round 5 Tenpai, I lost 2-0. I lost the roll that game and it was very hard to win. Round 6 I versed Snake Eye Kashtira again. That was a 2-1 to me. Round 7 I versed Horace PK, a 2-1 to me. Top 8 Voiceless Voice, I 2-0'd them. And then top 4 I again lost the roll in the Tenpai mirror and got 2-0'd.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that covers your tournament report. If you would like to get into the deck, let's get started.
Yeah. So it's pretty standard ratios of the monsters. I don't think you can play any less than this. Maybe one less of this, but also probably not.
Yep. I think the only thing we discussed was one copy of Pydra, but our deck likes to force a game state where we might be resolving multiple Pydra. Not Pydra, sorry. Fadra.
Fadra, yeah. And then again, for the same thing for the spells of the archetype 3/3, we play terraforming set rotation, so play even more copies of this than 3 because it's just really good.
Yeah, that card is ridiculous. I feel like there's some games that are like now non-games because that card has the not even a hidden ability. Sometimes you just aren't meant to even activate the effect to search. It is more of a liability to activate the effect to search. You just have it as 100%. A blanket card. It is Miscellaneousaurus, and it is egregiously powerful.
Like we said, people didn't really know what these cards did yet. So I had people the first couple rounds who, like, I would have this on the field, I would summon the white one, and they would like try and interact with it. It's just, like, you can't.
No.
So people just like, that's why I think this deck was so good this weekend, because people just weren't really aware of what the cards did. Just 3-pot, more consistency, can kill them through the damage halving. It doesn't matter. It's just, it's really good. And then to supplement the set rotation, 2 Fenrir and a planet. Probably should have been 3, but this card was amazing all day. Yeah, very, very happy with its inclusion.
Yeah. So I think the way that we sort of approached building the strategy compared to what other people were doing, where they were looking at cards like Heatwave for turn skips, Shifter for turn skips, we didn't look at those as feasible options into a lot of the cards people were picking. and especially a lot of
Mm.
the deck choices that we did expect. So game
Yeah.
one, it felt very unnecessary to have cards that are a potential liability when you could have well-rounded cards like Fenrir, where if you're made to
Yep.
start, they will solo your opponent half the time. How many times did Fenrir just win you the game on the spot?
Oh, too many to count. That guy was insane.
2400 vanishes
Uh,
stuff. Who would have thought?
I had one game where I summoned a Fenrir and then summoned the Red Dragon, went battle phase, and then I attacked with my Red Dragon, and they Tikabooed me, and then I just went, okay, attacked with Fenrir, banish it face down. It's like,
Yep.
yeah, the Fenrir was just really good. And then more back row hate and just go second cards in general. One Harpy, two Lightning Storm. These cards were really good. When you're like what Bowden says, we want to try and make the game like low card by hand trapping them, make them end on a bad board, and then you just have this to blow up their interruptions, and then you just summon a red dragon and the game's over.
Yeah. I think there was a point where we didn't have those in our deck. And we were looking at it like, well, why do we need these if they're going to make us start in most instances game one? And it's like, this is like a, like an issue. This is a liability. But then we realized, hey, like we'll win the role sometimes.
Yeah.
And when you make a lot of these board breaker decks start, the cards that they have to use to play against you, or even just like attempt for playback or negating effects, their droplet, their imperms, even enemy controller and stuff like that. And on top of that, it's like when you are hand trapping your opponent, they will maybe default to something like Divine Temple. And that's like another point of interaction that we are now able to deal with by having mass removal that'll also peel off maybe an imperm or a droplet.
Mm-hmm. And then hand traps that we thought were the best for the format we thought we were going into. So Ash, Ogre, Vela, Nib, Imperm.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I think the only thing that we considered was maybe Nibiru not being that good. And there was an argument for maybe Ogre not making the cut for the main deck. How did you feel about these? Were there any like issues that you found?
No, these were both very good all day. The one that I like, Vela felt the worst just because in the mirrors it did like less than nothing. But it was like all these hand traps had their place. To be honest, I was very happy with Ogre, and I was happy with Nib. In the matchups, it was bad. It just came out immediately. Like I drew it once in a matchup where it was unplayable, but like I still drew it enough in matchups where it was good game ones where I was happy that it was in the deck in the end.
Sure. You guys will notice that there is a distinct lack of Dimension Shifter, Forbidden Droplet, and I guess like Heat Wave, like equivalent sort of cards, right? The cards that we did consider were cards like Ghost Mourner was in the deck for a good chunk of time. And it sort of just kept floating in and out. Obviously, like there could be a world where that takes the space of like Vela. But with like how powerful and prevalent we felt Snake Eye could potentially be, given that it is arguably the best deck. Then why wouldn't we have Vela in our main deck? Oh, like why wouldn't we have Nibiru in our main deck? And it just kept compounding, right?
You're also just expecting Voiceless to be this deck's worst matchup, so just having Ogre in the main deck just made it a lot.
Yeah, it's like the other thing that I've seen a lot of people play into the trap. Like this is where it gets really, really awkward because we did have Shifter in our deck, right? But there's instances where you will have hands that are just like Shifter, Vela, Ogre, and you will potentially cut off a lethal shot with the Shifter. What are you going to do? Not activate it? You also have some hands where you have to lead with Shifter as a means of stopping your opponent from doing something. So you're losing value from cards like Ogre, whatever. It does insulate you from your opponent's copies of Ghost Ogre and Effect Vela, which is awesome. But then it still doesn't beat Imperm, Ash, all of those, bells and whistles. I guess it can beat Droplet as well, is something you want to argue. But it felt like a -1 card to achieve very little when Snake Eye can still play through it if it's your only card that is playable, right? Like they'll just set up Temple, whatever, and you need to draw very specific at that point. And then Droplet felt kind of similar, but is probably a card that can interchange between the non-engine in a deck like this. We opted for more hand traps because we wanted to simplify the game in matchups where they would have cards like board breakers or their own hand traps. So like Snake Eye, you would throw a hand trap at your opponent's Snake Eye deck, and then you would hope that you would have 2 points of play when your opponent throws hand traps at you. The game gets kind of simplified. Whoever has the extra layer is able to get in front. Tenpai felt like it did that quite well with how the
Because of
cards
the field
function,
spell.
with the field spell, even with Kaiman in battle phase, completely ignoring cards like Effect Veiler. So, and that's why we sort of built it and took this approach. So the main deck is 40 cards.
40 in the main, yeah.
40 in the main. We'll get into
And
side or
then
extra, whatever you feel.
this extra, I think I summoned 5 cards from it today. So
Yeah,
Striker.
I think the extra is something we agreed is it will change constantly, right? Like I don't think it's something that will be set in stone, and there were cards that we picked based on what we assumed the meta would be.
Yeah, Striker SP. I summoned both of these. They're both good. Seal. Yeah, this card is very good, obviously. And then we also played Hida and Princess. I did not summon either of these at all.
Hooray, I'm vindicated.
Yeah, I mean, you were telling me not to play them, but here we are. I mean, I never like needed another card in that position anyway.
I feel like there's weird game states where we felt that those were appropriate, right? Like whether it be through Simmel, Archfiends, Z-Barrier, or otherwise, there are worlds where you just like find extra reach by having access to these utility link monsters, but they're not too deep to be like Zelantis, Raging Phoenix, whatever, right? That's what we agreed. It's like, hey, like we don't need this. Like it doesn't feel like it'll win us the game outside of the utility options that we put instead.
And Typhon, I didn't summon it a single time. Yeah, I mean, I could see spots where it comes up, but yeah.
The one Centurion guy that doesn't FTK you, I guess. Who knows? But
and then a bunch of utility synchros, Samurai Destroyer. I did summon this. It was good when I summoned it.
Was it the correct? It was 100% the correct card to summon in that instance, or did you do it just so you could say that you did it?
I summoned it to get rid of a Skull Guardian.
Sure. It has like applications in some of the other matchups, I guess, right?
Yeah, it was mainly for you, Bell. Like that matchup's hard, and this fixes
even similar to like Media Burst in some spots, right?
Yeah. Moonlight. I summoned it once. It was whatever. It was there mainly for when you go first. You summon the seal, and then they go battle phase attack, and then you bounce, and then you can like bounce another card with
big
this
tempo swing alongside hand traps, right? Like you're keeping them off normal summons, you're keeping them off like maybe one extended that they have, and it can be really, really big.
And then original Black Rose, I summoned it once. It was okay when I summoned it. It probably could have been a different card. I mean, I think this card. No, I mean at the time, but I think you want to play this. It's just too good with the field spell.
Yep, just free board clear, always good.
This card's absurd. Just make it so they can't interact with me in the main phase, and then they also can't interact with me in the battle phase. Like what? It's just so busted.
Baby transcendent, right? That's the way that we looked at it half the time.
Crew Belt. I never summoned it. It probably could have been anything else. It's fine. And then I played 2 Bident, 1 Transcendent, 1 Trident. A bunch of this utility probably could have just been a second one of this, and maybe a third one of this. Burden was really scared of Unicorn and kept harping on to me to play multiples. I decided to not care, and I didn't get punished.
Pretty much.
But I didn't summon anything, so maybe they should have just been more Bident than this. But whatever.
So you went over the cards that you did play. I'll give my input on some of these cards when I was looking at theory. So in my head, I think hindsight Ruddy Rose should have definitely made the cut after playing a bit more in rated, and I feel like there were instances where just like Ruddy to like peel the graveyard in a simplified game, which is what we're trying to force, becomes like quite good. Like Dan said, I was afraid of Unicorn. I thought Bident Dragon was quite good. If they go Unicorn Ash and you have to interact with them, they are most likely getting 2 rips. And I think in some instances you could argue that it is correct to just remove the Bident if they have 2 copies, because it is quite difficult for them to climb. There are ways that they can still play. They can still transcend it. They can still do stuff like that when they have 3 bodies. But for the most part, I think a lot of stuff is facilitated by Bident Dragon. I went over the reasoning for not playing the Raging Phoenix stuff. I'm just trying to think if there was anything else that we were talking about. I guess it's like Cyber's Quantum Dragon is interchangeable with Samurai Destroyer, I suppose.
I think a lot of the choices just going to come down to your personal preference and like what you think your meta is. Like if you have no one that plays you Bell and there's not much voices, you probably just don't need to play Samurai Destroyer. I think the mandatory ones are definitely Meteor Burst and Black Rose. I don't think you can play without those.
There was another card that we tried, and I was talking to Nesh about this actually, and
So the Black Winged.
the Doolittle Chimera.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Doolittle Chimera gives you an extra pocket of reach where you normally wouldn't be able to have it. And the cool part is, like, you under Symbol Archfiends, you are able to make cards like Doolittle into like Biden or something, because it'll only restrict you to one. You don't get to climb up. So you're just gonna get this extra pocket of damage on board that you wouldn't normally be able to get to. And Fenrir also helps in those spots too. Specifically again against cards like D-Barrier, Symbol Archfiends.
Yeah.
And the other stuff I guess we were looking at was like Ancient Fairy Dragon.
Like
You
the
had,
Zolkin and Crystal
the
Wing.
Zolkin, Crystal Wing, the Blackwing Assault Dragon, stuff like that. You were pretty high on the Blackwing card. And then that was the last second cut, from what I remember.
Yeah, I cut it last minute for a princess, but I never needed the Blackwing and I never summoned the princess. So yeah.
Yeah, like
the Doolittle probably would have been good.
I had this conversation with Nesh, literally, like, while you were playing the event. We're just like, yeah, this is. He's like, I think. He goes, brother, I think the go first cards are very good, and I just go, you know what? Probably. I don't summon half of the extra deck. These will probably be fine.
Yeah.
But one thing to note when you do play those cards, and you do play cards like Fenrir in your deck, you are more susceptible to Nibiru without being insulated like you would normally when you do the base combo. So some food for thought, like maybe mix and matching. If you don't play Fenrir, those cards would be acceptable. You do play Fenrir, you are playing into Nibiru. And that was something that Jesse told me, and I was like, oh, that's kind of funny and interesting. So yeah, that's the extra deck. Those are my thoughts on that. Would you like to get into the side deck?
Side deck. This was probably the most contention we had. Like the last thing we finished up, I think. Would you say that?
Yeah, I think like we were definitely flip-flopping on a good chunk of cards, and I would like to argue that looking at this side deck right now on the Neuron screenshot, I think the only card that
I'm pretty happy with it, honestly.
I'm pretty sure the only card that was in there the entire time was Cosmic Cyclone.
Yeah, and Rivalry, but I guess that was sometimes in our main deck.
Yeah, sometimes in the main. Yeah, go for it. Let's have a look.
All right, I was really happy with this side deck. I do not regret any of the cards being in here, except for maybe one of them that we spoke about.
Sure.
Magnamut, Drillsworm. Magnamut is really good just because it adds you a guy, so it's consistency. But we didn't want to main it because it didn't really feel like there was that many decks where you want to summon it instead of just summoning like a Fenrir or activating Lightning Storm. And then Drillsworm was a last edition. This was a Santa Claus at one point. It was a Quackimary Draco at one point. And then at the end, like the night before, I think we were like, well, we're never siding in Draco. Why is this not just a Drillsworm?
Pretty much. And the reason that we thought the additional cards, so like Bestial's functionally just being like a hand trap with reach, giving you extra 25. It's more options to kill your opponent through cards like Barrier, Symbol Archfiends, as we said before. And even, to an extent, you do have ways to fade like Mistaken Arrest as well, just like generating a 25 for free. The other thing to note, I think, is... I'm just trying to find my train of thought real quick. It's just like going first, I think these cards provide pretty reasonable benefit. They function quite well as seals, right? That's the big one.
Yeah. I think a lot of this side deck also came down to the fact that I felt Voiceless Voice was the hardest matchup. And so a lot of our cards were to help us with the Voiceless Voice. Like we sided 3 Crow and 3 Bell.
And everything sort of does have the overlap, and we're still trying to compensate for when we're able to play or draw. So like when we have won our game and we go, when we have lost our game and we go to sideboarding, we know that we're picking second, right? Like that was the whole idea. It's like, we know we're picking second. That's fine. We get to dictate all the choices. However, when we win the game, we don't know whether our opponent's picking first or second unless it's the mirror match. And even then, there's some levels to it where your opponent may pick first in the mirror match that you would have to consider. I wouldn't recommend it. But again, that's why we have all these more well-rounded cards that will cover, will my opponent start in Voiceless? Potentially. Will my opponent pick second? Potentially. We don't have narrow cards like Heat Wave, D-Barrier, or the equivalent. Obviously, D-Barrier would function into the mirror match where you are assuming you're going first, but in the other matchups, it's doing nothing. And maybe you could pick a more ignorant card for the mirror match. So that was the main idea.
I will say that every person made me deck made me go second post side when I beat them, except for the mirror who made me go first. Every other deck always started, which I think was probably correct.
I feel like it's good to just have that level of awareness, though, right? Because like these cards aren't even bad going first. These cards aren't bad going second, so we just have layers on top, more levels than the opponent can twist themselves for.
We played Drew Cosmic for more back row hate. It was also just good into voiceless and good into the mirror.
This card also helps with the 50-50 spot that we had, again, where do you know if your opponent's going first or second? And it would function almost identical in some game states that we felt against like decks where they would start, you would hand trap them, they set a card, right? Usually you would rather have a Lightning Storm when you know you're going second, but obviously you don't. So Cosmic felt good enough as a card we can set turn 1 that will trade 1-for-1, or a card that we can activate going second that will trade 1-for-1, and hopefully clear a card that'll help us kill them.
And into voiceless, it was just good to take out Lightning Storms because we want to be, realistically, we'd like to be summoning a Magnamut or a Drill Swarm. So Lightning Storm just gets worse, and then Cosmic is nice.
Yep.
And then Rivalry, kind of the same vein of if we don't know we're going first or second, this card can function in both spots. It's a good card as well.
It's a reasonable catch-all into pretty much every matchup. I think it's pretty decent. Obviously not Tenpai or like mono
yeah,
decks,
of course.
Like your Melodious equivalents and stuff like that. So something to note. But...
And the last card was Droll. Bowden was very high on this one. I did not like it very much, but it did win me my flu matchup, so I guess it had its place.
So the theory with Droll was we saw the Christian Urena profile that came out for Tenpai. I thought that list was probably going to set a marker for decks similar to ours. And they are playing 3 Pot of Desires and 3 copies of Prosperity. And Droll is just a card, when they have to lead with those cards to get to Engine, Droll is crippling. Similar to decks that are going heavier on cash cards, right? If you're not aware that Droll can and will exist in the format, you might get quite greedy and you might play into Droll by accident. You know, let's say you're playing this deck specifically and you have a Fenrir and a field spell, and you do not want to discard another card in your hand. You will lead Fenrir, you will add Fenrir, you will ditch it for field spell. And now you're getting Droll, and the game will end.
Yeah.
Just quickly, Dan, I think we should probably go over Bell and Crow a little bit more as well, because I feel like those are something we don't see too often. And the DD Crow we actually got from YouTuber Kenny Nguyen. You linked me the video, and I've known Kenny for a while. He actually replied to me today. He said, I downloaded Messenger. We had a good conversation about cards like Crow. Did they serve a purpose this weekend? Did you think that they were quite good? In testing, they felt quite powerful.
I think in testing these cards both felt good. In practice, I did not draw them the entire tournament.
So it just didn't matter, sure.
It's hard to say.
So the theory with Crow is that it does find itself covering multiple decks where other cards like Crossout tend to be more narrow. And I think we agreed that we didn't want to have Crossout as a means to stop hand traps. If we had Crossout in our sideboard, it would be for the mirror. Yeah. Because again, the mirror match is making you start, and what is the best card in the game for mirror matches? Especially when a deck is built like this, it would be Crossout. Yeah. So
I think in hindsight, I probably would have played Crossout over this, just because there were a lot more people playing Tenpai than I thought originally. Like there was in our top 8, the top 8 decks were 4 Tenpai, 2 Voiceless, 1 PK, 1 Snake Eye.
Sure. I told you before your top 4 when we were discussing, it's like you didn't want to put Droll into the mirror match, and I was like, maybe did you end up doing Bell or Droll?
I did Bell and DD Crow, no Droll.
Sure. So like, do you think that maybe that's something people could look at moving forward into like the Tenpai mirror match, or even just against Tenpai in general? If you want to have these nice cards that have overlap into other matchups, like these cards function into Voiceless, they function into Lab, they function into so many other decks. But if they function into Tenpai, it's pretty good in my book. Bell being able to negate in damage, I believe, because it does negate the activation, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So that's something that other cards functionally don't do, and if they do, have the ability to stop something in damage step, that would be Forbidden Droplet, and that's a little bit more cost committal and still not, that good, because you would have to set it, and I feel like it's susceptible to removal. So that was the logic for stuff like that. And I guess we were testing Lab as well, and testing against it, and we felt that if we didn't have a card like Bell, we might actually fold to a deck like Labyrinth, correct?
Yeah, because of Daruma Cannon being so potent.
Yeah, it's like it's not even what we found was it wasn't actually even just like Daruma Cannon, if it resolves good, that means you didn't have removal. But if
Yeah.
they're able to have Daruma and have resolved combo, Lovely has ripped a card, they've resolved like the Ari, the clock, all the silly stuff, and they're just
It
like
just spirals out of
full,
control.
yeah, it snowballs. And the idea of this deck was that we do not let our opponents have a second turn, but if the game doesn't let us have let us kill them on our second going second board, we want them to have the least amount of cards possible. Do you think
Yeah.
the deck achieved that enough of the time, or were you just like killing them outright after hand trapping?
Yeah, I don't think I went. I think I went to a turn, like a second turn, like maybe 3 or 4 times in all the games. I was just hand trapping them and then killing them immediately.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Some of that would come down to the fact that people don't really know how to interact with the deck yet, but other times it would just come down to the fact that like you hand trap them twice, you activate Lightning Storm, and then summon a red, and that's just lethal in most cases.
I pose the hypothetical to you, right? Let's say Oceanic Championship was tomorrow in current format. Would you load this deck again?
Probably not.
Sure. That is reasonable. If there was a world where you consider it, would there be changes that you would make? Maybe people at home are watching and they want to play it at their state championships, their European nationals, or equivalent.
I think a lot of the changes in the deck comes down to the meta you're expecting. Like these could easily be mourners if you're if you're expecting more Snake Eye and not as much like voices and mirrors and random shit. Like we played this because there's like people who play, like I said, PK tops. Like there's a couple PK players in Queensland. One tops the Sydney YCS. They only play PK. So playing cards like this is just good in our meta, whereas Mourner might be better. I think I would at least side this though, even if I'm not meaning it, just for voiceless, because again that matchup's kind of hard. Same with Nib. Like if the meta's not that favorable for Nib, this could easily be a different card swapped into side. I think Vela, Ash, and Imperm are pretty universal. Like again, maybe you could main Rivalry, depending on the meta. Yeah, I think this deck really comes down to meta. The main thing would be I would want to play a third Fenrir for sure.
Yeah. Again, the other thing that you noted, and it's something in my head I was like, I guess it comes up, but we have ways around it, but it's not ideal. Is when set rotation is in our deck going first, it is probably at its weakest against decks that can potentially have a Cashier card in them. Yeah, but going second, obviously, we just don't care because ideally the game is done and they will die.
I think. I don't think I would play this card again.
Sure.
It was coming out in almost every game 2 and 3, but I don't even hate just playing this instead of the third Fenrir, but maybe it should just be a third Fenrir. I'm not sure. But set rotation felt weak for me.
That's fair. I guess there's also some weird playback if they are going first and they're making seals. Like you do have these weird dimensions to it where like set rotation is probably one of the weaker cards in that instance, right?
Yeah, I think we had it come up in testing too, where like we would set rotation, and then something would happen in the game, and they would not flip their field spell, and we just can't play another Sengen after they get rid of it, and that felt pretty awkward. So this card is like really good because like I mean you want to see Sengen. It's this card is how you win games. If this card didn't exist, this deck would be awful, obviously.
Pretty much.
But this card is like, I don't know. It's good when it's good, and it's really bad when it's bad. So yeah, I'm not sure.
All right. Well, I think we went pretty in depth. I'm happy with the result. I was hoping you'd take home the dub. But obviously, with limited testing and a very broad field, I think we had to accommodate for a lot of stuff that we couldn't accommodate for. Did you end up figuring out how many Tenpai decks entered the tournament?
How many entered? No, I'm not sure.
No. But the conversion rate was quite high, right? Like we had.
I feel like it was, yeah.
More than 50% in top cut, I believe, right? We had 3 in top
50%, 4 Tenpai.
4 Tenpai, yep. So 50% of top cut. 8. Yeah, so those records were, I believe, to be like X1 or better, but maybe some X2.
I think every Tenpai the topped was X1.
X1 or better, right? Because we had Tenpai. Yeah. Tenpai actually went undefeated.
Tenpai won Swiss. Right? Yeah, the person who won Swiss was playing Tenpai. He went 7-0 in Swiss and then won the whole tournament in top cut as well.
Yep, and it's also his third win. His third
third states in a row.
So congratulations.
Shout out to Josh.
Yep, beautiful stuff. And I'm sure he'll.
Konami needs to ban dragon monsters so he can't top anymore.
Yes. Dragon deck every year. 3 years, never stopping. Next year we'll get a new dragon deck, and Josh will win with that too. So I guess that covers the deck. If you have any last minute shout outs or any other input, feel free, Dan. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, shout out to Matt Wildsmith. He lent me Trident Dragon. So, Jerome was right. Ask your friends. They've got the Trident. Yeah, and then shout out to Lincoln for being a great judge, Andy for judging as well, and everybody who helped out.
That's perfect. I'm glad you did well. I'm glad the conversion happened. Otherwise we would have no deck profile, so no content, and we would have an upset Dan, and we'd be back to One Piece.
Yep.
So no, congratulations on your accomplishment.
Well, we're going back to One Piece anyway, but yes.
That is fair, yes. Back to One Piece, and then we'll test Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit. All right, Dan. Well, congratulations. Thanks for the profile, and I'll see you guys later.